On this day in history, back in 1969, the activists who became known as the Chicago 8 stood in federal court and pleaded not guilty to conspiracy charges. That was tied to the violent protests at the 1968 Democratic National Convention over in Chicago. The group included anti-war leaders David Dellinger, Renee Davis, Tom Hayden, Abby Hoffman, Jerry Rubin, Black Panther co-founder Bobby Seale, and activists John Froines and Lee Weiner. They were all accused of crossing state lines with intent to incite a riot. The trial became a spectacle as the defense clashed with the judge, using the courtroom to attack the Vietnam War as well as racism. Seale's case was eventually separated, and the Chicago 8 then became the Chicago 7. In early 1970, the jury acquitted all of conspiracy but convicted 5 on lesser riot charges. Franz and Weiner were cleared. Meanwhile, a federal appeals court later threw out those convictions and most of the contempt findings, and the government did not retry the case.